4 years ago this month, George Floyd was murdered. We remember the video of Derek Chauvin's knee on his neck, and we remember George Floyd saying, "I can't breathe." We remember what it was like in the weeks and months that followed, the protest from Minneapolis to Missoula, and the broader racial reckoning. We saw some changes. Now, some were performative. Black Lives Matter painted down the street in the middle of D.C. and New York, black boxes posted on social media. But there were also calls to reconsider the parts of history we celebrate. A big part of that conversation was about how to handle relics of the Confederacy. In some places, that meant debate over statues or monuments. In others, like Shenandoah County, Virginia, the debate was over school names. In 2020, the school board there voted to rename the Stonewall Jackson High School, rename Ashby Lee Elementary School, both named after Confederate leaders. Well, since 2021, the schools were instead called Mountain View High School, Honey Run Elementary. But 4 years have passed. The school board leadership has changed. And this week, the current board voted 5-1 to change the names back. Listen to some of the local people at the board meeting where it happened.
My first experience with Confederate sympathizers was in the year of 1958. I was 7 years old. They poisoned the family dog, shot through our home, mutilated our livestock, and left bloody sheets on the mailbox. Is this the type of legacy that you want to put in Shenandoah County's public school buildings?
They honor men who believe that I have less value and worth because I'm Black. If this board decides to restore the names, I would not feel like I was valued and respected, and you would not be doing your job. Thank you.
And of course, there was a vote to 5-1. There were some people who supported the change back to honor Stonewall Jackson.
If we're talking about racism, my name is Stonewall Jackson. Am I racist? You know, somebody named Stonewall Jackson. Look at what the man done. He fought for his country. He did what, at that time, what was in that part of the country, that's what was called upon him.
I ask that when you cast your vote, you remember that Stonewall Jackson and others fighting on the side of the Confederacy in this area were intent on protecting and preserving the land, the buildings, and the lives of those under attack. Preservation is the focus of those wishing to restore the names of Stonewall Jackson High School and Ashby Lee Elementary School.
So my next guest has a unique perspective on this. Warren Christian is a descendant of Stonewall Jackson. He is the Confederate general's great-great-grandson. Warren, thank you for being with me. So on the question of should these names have been restored, they've now made the decision. What's your message to the board there in Shenandoah County?
Well, my message is, I'm saddened, I'm disappointed. But as a firm believer in democracy, public schooling, and local control of schools, I respect their right to rename their school, and I respect their right to do what is morally wrong. And Victor, I really appreciate you having me on and giving me the opportunity to speak about this. But honestly, I don't think it should matter so much what I have to say about it. The school board shouldn't particularly care what I have to say, and I can't imagine they do. But I think who they should listen to is their own students. And that night before Thursday night before they changed the name, there was another speaker who I don't think you mentioned, a courageous 8th grader, Aaliyah, who stood up in front of the school board and she said, "I'm a Black student, and if the names are restored, I would have to represent a man who fought for my ancestors to be slaves." That makes me feel like I'm disrespecting my ancestors and going against what my family and I believe. Yeah. And she's exactly right. No student should have to go to a school named after someone who fought for the continued enslavement of their ancestors. And even for those who liked the name or wish it hadn't been changed, I don't know how you can vote for that name change, to rename it again after my great-great-grandfather, after that brave student and others so clearly and cogently explained how that this would harm them. and it costs you nothing to just leave it how it is. So I think it's just wrong.
And it costs hundreds of thousands of dollars to change it back. You got to think about letterhead and signage and websites and school uniforms and all the things that, think about what your high school name was printed on that have already been changed over the last 4 years. You know, when we have this conversation about Confederate monuments, often it's framed as a reckoning with decisions of another time, of the mood of another era. But when a school board today says we are going to honor Stonewall Jackson, we have to consider what they are telling us today that they think about the people who live in this community. I want to read for you what the Coalition for Better Schools that pushed for this locally, what they said. They said that we believe that revisiting this decision is essential to honor our community's heritage and respect the wishes of the majority. The heritage, not hate justification. To that, you say what?
I think it's important to remember our heritage, to honor our heritage, to honor our history, remember our history, and most importantly, to learn from our history. And to me, the most important lesson from the Civil War was really simple. Slavery was wrong. And slavery that was justified by a strong belief in white supremacy that put white people at the top of a racial hierarchy and Black people on the bottom, so strong that it made it seem okay for one person to enslave another, is also just very clearly wrong. And unfortunately, still with us today. When slavery ended, this idea of white supremacy didn't magically go away. When segregation ended, it didn't go away. And with us doing things now like demonizing accurate and historically accurate and like critical understanding of our history, calling it CRT and saying we're not going to teach it, it's certainly not going to go away by doing things like that. So I think it's a bad sign.
Yeah. You know, I know there are probably plenty of people watching and thinking the great-great-grandson of, as I told you during the break, of Stonewall Jackson is a young man, which reminds us that this is not that long ago. Warren Christian, thank you so much for being with me for a few minutes this morning.